Alright, just a little bit of silliness to start things off today. So, and it just vibrated off my table. Okay, so welcome to week 7. Today what we're going to be dealing with is some evaluation examples. And pretty much looking at what you should and should not do when you're writing a evaluation, if you're going to come across as a trustworthy observer and a trustworthy evaluator. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started here. So first off, what makes a good evaluation? Well, there are going to be some elements that will make or break your evaluation essays. There's every type of evaluation deals with these issues. Okay, so first off, we have strong criteria. Is it clear to the reader that why your criteria is important in determining your subject's quality? Are your criteria able to be met by your or any subject? Okay, we talked a little bit about this last week. Your criteria needs to be something that your subject can achieve. Okay, you cannot have possibly high standards. Okay, not only that, but over the course of writing your evaluation, you need to be clear about what your standards are and how something can achieve your standard. Okay, so how something can meet it. Next, acknowledgement of biases. Are you willing to accept that some things that you judge as quality are based on your own personal biases? Can you move past those biases and create a fair evaluation? This can be difficult for some people because they can't really divorce themselves from their opinions when they're trying to evaluate something that they need to be maybe a little bit more impartial on. Okay, when they have to try to observe what's actually happening there and try to judge quality on a more or less impartial basis. Okay, so it is actually good if a writer takes the time to acknowledge, hey, I've got these biases ahead of me. I've got these biases that are going to influence the way I look at this subject. Okay. Now, we saw a little bit of that last week when we were looking at those 2 movie reviews. Okay, the How It Should Have Ended guy, he was very upfront about the fact that he loves superhero movies. He loves superhero origins. He loves the source material for Wonder Woman. So that was going to color his evaluation of it. Same with Critical Drinker. Although his was a little bit more cynical, he's judging it based on what other superhero cinema has come out in recent years. And part of his evaluation was, okay, we're looking at this 2 years after the fact. We've just had Captain Marvel come out. He personally didn't like it. So let's go ahead and do a comparison, relatively speaking, and talk about Wonder Woman and think about whether it's really as good as we think it is. Okay? Next, knowledge of the subject. Do you have enough information to make a measured evaluation of your subject? Have you done enough with the subject? Watched, read, experienced it in a great enough quantity that you can anticipate all the elements that would contribute to an evaluation of it. Okay? So basically, as I mentioned when I gave you the assignment requirements, you want to have experienced your subject at least twice in order to give a fair evaluation of what the quality of the subject is. Okay? So you need to know the ins and outs of that subject. You need to know the ins and outs of whatever it is that you're going to be evaluating so that you can really give a true and fair assessment of it. Okay? If you're only looking at things on a surface level, it's going to be harder to try to justify your opinion if you're not getting the full picture. So, what we're going to do today, as part of this, we're going to do some data generation, and we're also going to look at some examples of evaluations that have come before. All right, so we're going to start off with a journal exercise, okay? And this is going to help you to come up with a few possible subject matters for your evaluation essay. So in your journal, I want you to write about 3 or 4 potential subjects for your evaluation. Now, these could be anything ranging from films to television shows to books or experiential subjects like hotels, parks, theme parks, airlines, anything like that. Okay. I would also say that if you're going to review things like concerts, That would be an experiential subject. Okay. Think about and write about the following for each chosen potential subject. Okay. So first off, how often have you experienced that subject? Okay. How often have you been to that park? How often have you stayed at that hotel? How many times have you watched that movie? How many episodes of that television show have you seen? How many times have you read that book? So on and so forth. Okay. Write that down in your journal. Maybe just devote a sentence to how many times you've experienced the possible subject. Next one, how much do you know about the potential subject? What do you know about its backstory? What do you know about its history? What do you know about that subject's purpose? Who it's intended for? Okay. What do you know about who uses that subject, or who uses whatever it is that you are looking to evaluate? What are some memorable things about your potential subject? Is there anything that sticks out in your mind in regards to the subject of your evaluation? Like, for instance, I'll give you an example from my own experience. I don't want to be that guy, but as my family tends to do an annual trip to Orlando around spring break. Okay. This last year it was kind of truncated because COVID-19 hit around the time that we were there. So we wound up having to shorten things, but we had the opportunity to go, and we've gone several times in the past. And when we go, we always stay at one particular resort at the Walt Disney World resort. The one hotel we stay at is called the Pop Century. It's actually the least expensive hotel to stay at on Disney property. And it's also one of these kind of gimmicky hotels. In this case, the gimmick for it, which me and my wife actually kind of adore, is pop culture of the second half of the 20th century. So several of the buildings are themed after certain decades of the 20th century. So you have 3 buildings for the 1950s, 3 for the 1960s, 3 for the 1970s, 2 for the 1980s, 1 for the 1990s. Okay, and there's a lot of stuff that they use as decor around the resort, around this particular hotel, that they use as decor, which are giant figures of stuff that was prevalent in that particular decade. In fact, they identify the buildings based on these giant sculptures. To give you an idea of what we're talking about here, I believe in the 50s, 2 of the buildings, one has Lady and the other has the Tramp. And you go in the 70s, one of them has a giant Mickey Mouse phone, which used to be a big high-ticket thing everybody needed, like a Mickey Mouse watch. You go to the 1990s, the giant thing is a laptop computer. If you go to the 1980s, one of the buildings is marked with a giant Walkman. Okay, so this kind of gives you an idea of what we're talking about here. So I've experienced this hotel several times. In fact, we've done it before and after they did a major renovation at this exact hotel. Okay, so I could actually tell you a lot of the stuff that is different between when we first went and the most recent time that we went, and I can actually give you an idea of which one we like better. To be quite honest, we like the renovations better. Okay, so but that gets into some of the more memorable things about the hotel and some of the more memorable things that I could include in a evaluation. Now let's go to the last one. Into what category would you place your potential subject? Now this ties into creating criteria. So in general, what kind of categories can you create that your subject will fit into? Okay. For instance, for media properties, is there a certain genre that it falls into? Is there a certain type of show, a certain type of movie it is? Okay, is there a certain audience that it's going for that you can categorize it by? Same with books. If it's like a experiential thing, if it's like a theme park, who's the target audience? Who's the target guest? Okay, for instance, we've actually been considering this next year. We're planning another Orlando trip. This time, for the first time, we're going to go to the Universal Orlando Resort. Our daughter's never seen it. My wife's never seen it. I've only been there once. Okay, and that was like decades ago. So there's actually a significant difference between the audience that Walt Disney World is made for, because it's more aimed toward a younger audience, but it has some stuff for adults. It has some stuff for older teenagers, that sort of thing. Okay, but on the other hand, you go to Universal, it's primarily geared toward older kids, older teens, adults. Okay, it has a lot more stuff that's less whimsical and for that matter. They do have sections that are made for like smaller kids, but the majority of the park isn't made for smaller kids. It's made for older kids, like my daughter. Okay. So this is what I want you to think about for this journal exercise. Think about these 4 questions and put 4 possible evaluation subjects through all 4 questions. Then read over your responses to the questions and then compose a list of criteria for the category of each potential subject to compare them against. Okay? We're going to take 30 minutes to do this exercise. Again, this is a journal exercise. This is not one you have to post to the message boards at all. It's not one you have to make public. This is for your own reference so that you can get your mind in the right place to start thinking about doing evaluation. Okay? So let's take 30 minutes, and I want you guys write that, and then we will continue after that. All right, and we're back. All right, so from this journal writing, you should be able to choose a good subject for your evaluation. Okay, You should have enough material there that you can make a reasoned decision of what you want to write about for this particular project. So look at the experience you've had with each subject. The more experience you have, the more prepared you are to evaluate it. Okay. Remember, one of the things I specifically asked about was how well do you know your subject. This includes how often have you experienced it. How well have you experienced it. Okay. And look at the list of criteria for each subject. A more detailed, more in-depth list of criteria will make for a better evaluation, but not criteria so impossible that nothing could ever meet them. Okay? So remember, we want to keep our criteria reasonable. It's something that it's something that a subject within that category could reasonably meet. Not some standard that is so pie in the sky, humongously impossible that there's no possible way that anything could ever meet it. Okay? We're not looking for perfection. We're looking for good. Okay? Now read over the experiences you've had with each subject. In your judgment, would they be interesting to an audience? Who would your audience be? Okay? This is important here. You need to know who you're writing for. What kind of an audience are you trying to aim it for? So we need to think about who is the target audience for whatever it is that you are evaluating. And in that case, then you're going to need to tailor the essay to meet that audience. Okay? Because that's who's going to be the most interested in it. Okay? All right, so now the next thing we're going to do here is we're going to take a look at the few evaluation examples so that you can pick up any elements that might be useful for your own. In fact, this is going to be the remainder of the lecture here. So we want to try to pick up on this stuff, get you in the right mindset. These will be from both regular people and from prominent writers. So some of these people are pros and some of these people are not. Okay, you will see that based on the writing. Okay, after each evaluation, I want you to post your reaction and elements you felt were good or bad about each evaluation to the new thread on questions to the professor. Okay, I have a thread set up that is going to be strictly for your responses to these reviews. Okay, or your responses to these evaluations. Okay, I want you to put all of your reactions into that one thread. Now, I will be giving you time after each one of the evaluations so that you can make your post. Okay, and in fact, when we wrap it up, when we get to the last one, it's just gonna be right at the end of the lecture. Okay, so you will have a sufficient amount of time with it fresh in your mind to get your thoughts posted to questions to the professor. Okay, I would recommend keep a thread open. As you're listening, write down your responses, put them into the thread, come back to the video, list the next one, put it in the thread, so on and so forth. And once you've got all the once you've got all the evaluations done, then you can post it. Okay, that would be the strongest recommendation to you. All right, so let's take a look at some of these evaluations. All right, so the first one we're going to be looking at is a evaluation of a theme park. Okay, in this case, it is an evaluation of Six Flags Great Adventure, which is a Six Flags theme park in New Jersey. Okay, this is from the website Coaster Critic. The evaluator is the founder of that site. He's simply called Joel. The site coastercritic.com is a blog. It's a theme park blog. Okay, so what Joel does is he gives numerical scores to the overall atmosphere, the individual rides and attractions, and a rating called the Get Over Here Index. Okay, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe he uses a 1 to 5 scale. Okay, we'll see when we get over to that blog. Okay, so we're going to take a look at the blog. We're going to take a look at the blog post for Six Flags Great Adventure. All right, so here we are at coastercritic.com. Okay, now this is a site that's several years old, and this particular post is from 2007. But the text of it is still here, and certain ones of the pictures they used are still here, even if the header picture is not. Okay, So let's take a look at the review of Six Flags Great Adventure. Okay, go ahead and read along with me. So again, this is dated July 21st, 2007. Okay, so here's how he phrases it. Flagship Six Flags Park is a story of extreme highs and lows. Six Flags Great Adventure, Jackson, New Jersey. Last visit, September 2006. Six Flags Great Adventure, located in Jackson, New Jersey, is probably Six Flags' flagship park. While Magic Mountain has been downsized in the past few years, Great Adventure has flourished. With 7 new roller coasters in the past 8 years and the tallest and fastest roller coaster on the planet. Obviously, the company is investing a lot in Great Adventure. Not to mention Philadelphia and New York City are just a few hours away. A point of contention for a lot of enthusiasts has been the park's frequent breakdowns on major attractions like Kingda Ka and Batman and Robin. Notable rides and attractions. I can't recall any particularly notable rides or attractions. You will find a swinging inverter themed as a space shuttle, along with a long list of flat rides and water rides. Theming and atmosphere. Great Adventure is located next to a lake in northern New Jersey. The park has been relatively clean in my experiences, and the theming was standard Six Flags fare. 2 new sections were recently added. The Golden Kingdom is home to Kingda Ka and a White Tiger exhibit. The Plaza del Carnaval opened in 2006 with El Toro and some pretty authentic-smelling Mexican food. Coaster breakdown. Trinity of coaster goodness with an uneven but large supporting cast. El Toro, Nitro, and Kingda Ka are an amazing trio. Then we have he has some photos of the coasters, and then we get to the rundown of all the coasters that are there. So we have Roadrunner Railways, which is a steel kiddie coaster. Small Zamperla kiddie coaster. He did not ride it. Blackbeard's Lost Treasure Train, steel family coaster. Did not ride it. I've never ridden it, but it's identical to Beaverland Mine Ride at Geauga Lake, which I gave a 5 average. It's a fun family coaster. Okay, so he uses a 10-point scale. Batman and Robin, the Chiller, dueling launch shuttle coaster. Did not ride. Unfortunately, this dueling launch coaster has been shut down during both of my visits. Check out some pics here. Superman Ultimate Flight, the steel flying coaster, also did not ride. Another ride that was down during my visit. I've ridden its clone at Six Flags Over Georgia. It's a short flying coaster that's fun but over before you know it. At least the pretzel loop makes it worth the wait. I gave its clone a 7.0. Rolling Thunder Wooden Racing Coaster, 3.5. Rolling Thunder's a racing coaster, but you'd hardly know it. On both of my visits, the park was running trains on only one of tracks. Kind of defeats the purpose of a racing coaster, doesn't it? Great American Scream Machine, steel looping coaster, 4.0. An aging old steel looper that gives a shaky, rough ride. Check out my full review, including an on-ride video. Skull Mountain, steel indoor family coaster, 5.5. Decent indoor ride that's pitch black in most spots. Runaway Mine Train, steel family coaster, 6.0. Great mine train ride. Batman the Ride, steel inverted coaster, 6.5. This is yet another clone of the popular Batman the Ride found at Six Flags parks all over the world. It's packed with a tight twisting layout. For me, some of the inversions are a bit too close together. I got off feeling like I'd just been tumble-dried, but it's still a good ride. Medusa, steel floorless coaster, 8.0. Medusa was the first B&M floorless coaster. It features a smooth, loopy layout with open trains that have no floors and no walls. Kingda Ka, steel strata coaster, 8.0. The aforementioned tallest and fastest coaster in the world. It's more of a thrill ride than a full-fledged roller coaster, but it's quite a thrill indeed. Check out my full Kingda Ka review, including an on-ride video. Nitro, steel hypercoaster, 9.0. Nitro is an excellent hypercoaster that deserves the accolades and praise it receives. El Toro, prefabricated wooden coaster, 10.0. This wooden coaster is like no other. It's silky smooth and jam-packed with airtime. To see why I gave it a 10 out of 10 and ranked it 3rd on my top 10 coasters, read my full El Toro review. Six Flags Great Adventure QQM. Quality, 6.7 out of 10. Quantity, 13. Mix, strong. Get There Index, 4. A must-visit for anyone with a pulse. The numerous attractions coupled with that trinity of top-notch coasters results in weak 4 out of 4. The pros do just enough to outweigh the mediocre coasters and subpar park operations. Normally, I wouldn't recommend a park with a track record of breakdowns and outages, but Kingda's launch, El Toro's airtime, and Nitro's overall fun ride can make an enthusiast overlook quite a bit. Okay? So, as that this is a blog post, there's a number of hyperlinks in here to other articles that are present at Coaster Critic. He mentioned a few of them, particularly ones for individual coasters. I think I will probably give you the I want to click through to the King to Ka one because it has an on-ride video, which kind of helps you with that, and apparently the site can't be reached. Okay then. Alright, so here's what we're going to have you guys do. I want you to pause me and give me your ideas about what Joel's criteria were, and how you felt he applied that criteria to Six Flags Great Adventure. Okay? Go ahead and pause me for a bit, and then when we come back, we'll go to the next. Okay, so we are back. So we're going to take a look at the next evaluation, and this is a book review. The book in question is a book titled The Contradictions by Sophie Yanow. So the site that this book review comes from is NPR, for National Public Radio. The evaluator in question is a book reviewer named Etelka Lahochi. And this is a standard book review. So Lahochi reviews a graphic novel. However, she's not comparing it to other graphic novels. She's using the conventions of young adult and new adult literary fiction to base her review on, mainly because of the story that the Contradictions is telling. All right, so let's take a look at the review for the Contradictions. All right, so here's the article. The title is Contradictions Chronicles a Classic College Experience. So here's Itelka Lahochi. When you were in college, did you ever study abroad? The numbers say you probably didn't. Only 1.7% of American undergrads studied overseas in 2017 to 2018. And that's probably decreases with your parents' income bracket. Even so, among the college education classes, the experience of traveling to another country for a semester has far more mythic resonance than the numbers can justify. That's because it's the perfect adventure at the perfect time for those lucky enough to afford it. With parents and administrators as invisible lifeguards, dipping into another culture is a great way to establish a sense of self in the sloshy, floundering years of proto-adulthood. But with the built-in training wheels through, though, a semester abroad isn't usually the stuff of a good memoir. You may have felt like Bowles or Burroughs as you navigated the alleyways and undercurrents of your host city, but there was never any real peril hanging on a false step, and your reader knows it. However much you discover about yourself and the world, it's almost impossible to convey the power of those insights to someone else. That hasn't kept a lot of writers from trying, though. Those who succeed usually have larger-than-life events to draw on, as Andy Warner did for Spring Rain, his terrific graphic novel about studying in Beirut. Sophie Yanow doesn't have high-stakes urban political battles or interpersonal blow-ups to talk about in The Contradictions, her award-winning comic about studying and traveling in Paris and Northern Europe. But since she knows that and is humbly conscious of the limits of her experience, she makes you smile and cringe and sympathize anyway. Yanow perfectly captures that early 20s state of mind where you want to have principles but don't know exactly what yours are, so you're all too inclined to embrace those of anyone who seems intriguing, or just cute. Right up front, she admits she picked her study abroad program in Paris because she was coming off a breakup and there wasn't a language requirement. Paris must be so exciting for an artist, says one of the random fellow students she meets at the beginning of semester mixer. But Sophie isn't particularly interested in getting an artistic education. It's life she wants to learn about. She sets her trajectory with an impulsive act of social assertiveness that we've already guessed is a bit unusual for her. Spotting someone riding past on a fixed-gear bicycle, she thinks, I heard there weren't any fixies in Paris yet, so fixie means bike geek. Wait, bike geek might mean punk. A breathless chase ensues, and at the end of it she meets Xena, the girl who becomes her companion for the rest of the book. There's no particular chemistry drawing Xena and Sophie together. A night of hanging out talking politics and veganism doesn't produce romantic sparks or even a strong sense of connection. But they're both into anarchism and eager for new experiences, so they decide to hitchhike around Europe together during their break. The journey that follows isn't suspenseful or surprising. It's not even particularly angsty as college stories go. And yet Yanow's got this particular combination of astuteness and humility that makes the very lack of drama engaging. It feels nice to sit with someone who looks at the world the way she does. After a while, you start noticing all sorts of nuances within each low-key anecdote, and you'll wonder how much you're overlooking as you charge through life at your usual pace. Yanow's approach to storytelling and life is manifested in her artwork to a truly uncanny degree. It's no surprise to learn that she's taught at several art and cartooning schools. She understands exactly what each of her choices is going to do. Her ligne claire, or clear line, drawings are so geometrical and spare they could almost be ideograms. She even uses familiar symbols to convey ideas sometimes. When someone's frustrated, a little spiral appears above their head, and when they're drunk, it's a cluster of bubbles. This combination of economy and universality is at once unassuming, wry, and subversive. On one level, Yanow's alluding to Sophie and Xena's simultaneous yearning and loathing for the option of living life according to a well-established instruction manual. She's also lulling the reader a little bit, so when she alters one of her repetitive little motifs, distorting familiar proportions or abandoning a visual rhythm she's established, it hits like a thunderclap. The apparent simplicity of her compositions is deceptive, and her message is paradoxical. Even as she strips away extraneous detail, she's teasing you about your own tendency to oversimplify everything. The Contradictions isn't just an engaging read. It's a warming and affirming one. Yanow doesn't exalt what it is in the end, a fairly standard issue American Wanderjahr, but she also doesn't dismiss its significance or mock her younger self. She knows that even if you're lucky enough to have the benefit of training wheels, growing up is always going to be a vertiginous ride. Okay? So once again, go ahead and pause me and note down some observations you have about this evaluation. Look for Lahutchi's criteria and how the contradictions met or didn't meet it. And when we come back, we'll take a look at the next evaluation. Alright, so we are back now. So now the next one we're going to look at is a television review. And sometimes it's hard to pick out television reviews to work on because most times reviewers are only working with maybe 1 or 2, maybe at most 4 episodes at a time. So I wanted to find something that would be easy for you guys to understand what's going on. And there'd be enough explanation of what's happening and enough for you to understand what they're trying to get at as far as their evaluation goes. All right. And also this one's kind of a personal one for me because I happen to be a humongous fan of this TV show. So the show in question that's being evaluated is Steven Universe. So this is a review that comes from the AV Club, which is a very well-known entertainment news website. The evaluator's name is Eric Thurm. He is a writer who was assigned to this show. The AV Club has a segment called TV Club, where they assign reviewers to do an entire season, and they're doing it in real time along with the viewers. So when the viewer gets to see the episode for the first time, so does the reviewer. Okay? So here is what Therm does. Therm reviews 2 pivotal episodes of Steven Universe by recapping the events that occur in the episodes and analyzing the quality of the shows against other episodes and similar programming. Each episode gets a letter grade. Okay, so he's working with standard school grades, A, B, C, D, F. Okay? Let's take a look at this review. It is actually 2 of the most pivotal episodes of the series. All right, so here is the article. This is a review. It's titled Steven Universe Casually Shatters Its Own Backstory with a Pair of Intense Internal Episodes. Now, the episodes in question are called Can't Go Back and A Single Pale Rose. So, here we go with the review. By the way, if you're wondering, he gave 1 grade to both episodes, which is B+. So here is here's the evaluation itself. Every run of Steven Universe Beach City episodes gets followed by some climactic events tearing open part of our understanding of the broader Steven Universe mythos. Is this what you were expecting? Both of today's episodes move inexorably slowly toward decisive conclusions that set up major pieces of the season's endgame. And it's all put into motion by Ronaldo, who comes to get Steven in the middle of the night when he discovers a silent barn plopped down on the moon. In Can't Go Back, Steven discovers that Lapis has been hiding near the base, using an observation tool to watch the gems as they practice fighting in preparation for the probable diamond assault on the planet. He tries to convince her to come back to Earth and take a stand with the other gems, and to accept the fundamental constant of change in her life, a similar emotional journey to the ones taken by the other main characters on this show, only for Lapis's literal fight or flight instinct to win out. Most of Can't Go Back is lovely and understated, particularly the visual style of Steven and Lapis' confrontation inside the observation field, which allows storyboard artists and writers Mickey Brewster and Jeff Liu to render Lapis as a silhouette moving through scenes of the ordinary in Beach City. It's an effective, punchy way of showing Lapis drifting through a simulacrum of the life she won't permit herself to have. I will say, though, that her shadowy presence accidentally highlights my major issue with the episode. I wish we'd gotten a little more out of Steven's interactions with Lapis, who I've always liked as his character, but who occasionally feels a shade less complex than the rest of the gems. I get that Lapis' entire character is based on her being withholding and unwilling to open up to anyone who isn't Steven, or in some cases Peridot. But we knew she was afraid of the diamonds, and we knew she was willing to, against her emotional interests, sacrifice her relationships with the other gems in an effort to avoid being trapped again. Most of Can't Go Back plays out as a minor tragedy in which Lapis briefly warms to the idea of coming back to Earth, as expressed in her first ever song, That Distant Shore, with lyrics by Jeff Liu and music by Ivy, Surashu, and longtime Steven Universe musician Stemage. It's a sweet song that finds Lapis longing to be something other than what she is, using the observation orb to imagine herself as a bold, confident person who can put herself out there emotionally and prioritize her friendships over her own immediate safety. Basically, That Distant Shore is FOMO the song. Lapis uses her song and Jennifer Paz's singing, which I'm disappointed we haven't gotten on the show until now, to create a vision that's a little different from the emotional situations Steven Universe characters usually find themselves in, and a fitting one for a character who still hasn't managed to get past or find a way to cope with old trauma, or as Lapis puts it, I just can't let go of what happened to me. It feels inevitable that Lapis will show up during a climactic moment of confrontation toward the end of the season, so her abandonment of Steven still feels like an inevitable step on a path toward the more stable conclusion of her longer arc. Think Peridot stealing the diamond communication device from the moon base, but a little less funny and slightly less compelling. Then again, I'm a longtime Peridot fan. Still, that inevitability helps sell some of the lighter moments of the episode as easier to take, like Steven promising Lapis, I sleep with a teddy bear, no judgments, or his quieter, reflective attempt at imagining Lapis dropping the barn on the beach so Steven could go over and borrow sugar, even though Lapis doesn't know what sugar is. As often happens on this show, though, the relative levity goes out the window as soon as Steven has a vision of the diamonds. And it doesn't help Lapis that the contents of Steven's vision, yellow and blue informing pink diamond that her presence is the only thing needed to keep the Earth colony on track, followed by a strong suggestion that Pearl was apparently the one who really shattered Pink Diamond, feels a lot more immediate than Lapis's anxiety. The biggest emotional stake for Lapis now, or at least my biggest emotional stake in Lapis, is her relationship with Peridot, who is still kind of sad and living in the bathroom. And without a confrontation between the two characters, it's harder for me to remain invested in what's going on with Lapis. I'm sure we'll get that moment eventually, but until then, I'm more excited by Steven setting up the next episode by firmly, decisively telling Lion, I need you to take me to Pearl. I can't exactly shatter myself. With those 5 words, Steven Universe confirms a long-standing fan theory that Rose Quartz was, in fact, Pink Diamond, and opened the door for a whole bunch of new questions. Was there ever a real Rose Quartz, or did Pink Diamond start the rebellion herself in disguise? Does this mean Steven has standing as a member of the Diamond Authority? How did Rose hide her true identity from Garnet's future vision? I've never been the biggest theorist when it comes to the show's bigger picture. Generally speaking, I prefer to experience the show at the admittedly infrequent episodic rate. But this is definitely the most excited I've been about these questions in a while. Befitting this kind of fundamental shift in the way we think about the show, a single pale rose forces Steven to go on a wild, literally internal journey through Pearl's gem before we can confirm what actually happened all those years ago. After returning from the moon, Steven is on edge around Pearl, eventually confronting her head-on about who actually shattered Pink Diamond. Pearl clams up, as she usually does when faced with these kinds of questions, and sends Steven inside her gem to look for her cell phone, which she implies will contain the answers he's looking for. Pearl's mind is apparently made of several smaller, semi-psychological pearls, representing different aspects of her psyche, and Steven has to interact with quite a few of them to get where he's going. Putting aside questions like, is this what all gems look like on the inside? Writers and storyboard artists Amber Craig and Hilary Florido do an excellent job depicting the bizarre interior of Pearl's mind, particularly in Steven's interaction with the Surface Pearl, who is in charge of keeping items cataloged and alphabetized so that Pearl can retrieve them at will. Beyond this, Pearl's excitement over organization, communicated in a perfect D.D. Magna Hall line reading that contains both enthusiasm and the obvious papering over of bigger emotional problems that characterize the Pearl we've come to know and love. She also gives us a glimpse of quite a few phone numbers stored inside Pearl's gem, including ones sealed with lipstick or dotted with little hearts. Has Pearl secretly been exploring her sexuality with humans this whole time? Give me that episode! I suppose it's possible we wouldn't see those interactions from Steven's point of view. After all, as this Pearl puts it, I'm very good at compartmentalizing everything. While the big revelation from the end of this episode is the thing I'm sure people will be taking away from a single pale rose, I do want to highlight some more of those smaller touches. For example, the way Pearl uses her phone, which is hilarious. Not only does she have a literal briefcase instead of a smaller, more usable phone case, her primary use of the phone is to send Steven a text that reads, "Dear Steven, hello, love Pearl." And when one of the inner Pearls uses the phone to text Steven, "I want to tell you, but I can't," Craig and Florido managed to inject a shockingly effective use of the speak no evil monkey emoji to suggest that Pearl literally can't talk about what happened. As it turns out, once Steven progresses through the many internal Pearl gems, past past anxiety over losing Rose, past the war with Homeworld, past even the surface explanation for what happened to Pink Diamond, he discovers the truth. Pearl, who I think we can safely say was created to serve Pink Diamond, shapeshifts into Rose while Rose returns to her original form as Pink Diamond, swallowing a fake collection of gem shards so that she would appear to have been shattered after being struck with the sword, which, as we might recall, was designed to only poof gems, briefly destroying their physical form, but never the gem. This might also be an explanation for why Pearl doesn't shapeshift, something she claims she could do very early in the series, but rarely if ever displays. So there was no murder after all. Pink Diamond, Rose, had to create the illusion that she'd been shattered, in order to allow the rebellion to come to fruition, free the Earth from of Diamond rule forever. Except that, of course, it doesn't seem like Rose or Pearl anticipated the devastating attack that wiped out most of the crystal gems. At the moment, it seems like Steven Universe is more interested in interrogating how everyone will respond to this information, rather than diving deeper into questions of how the Diamond Authority works and what actually happened to Pink. After all, based on her reaction at the very end of the episode, it seems like not even Garnet knew the truth. And like Garnet back in pool hopping, I'm pleased to say that I really have no clue what's going to happen next. Alright, so, once again, go ahead and pause me and get your impressions of this evaluation on the questions of the professor. Again, looking for criteria that the reviewer is using. and how the subject either meets or does not meet those criteria. And then we'll come back with the next review. And we are now back. All right, so now we get to the most fun you'll ever have with a review. Okay, we're going to be looking at a couple of movie reviews right now. These reviews are actually written by a particular reviewer, and I specifically wanted to find this reviewer because of the particular place that he holds in pop culture. So we're going to be looking at reviews written by a film critic by the name of Armand White. Okay, Armand White writes for the National Review, which is a conservative news magazine. Why they would need a film reviewer is beyond me, but he writes for them. He writes traditional film reviews. Now, the reason why people know Armand White's name is because he is infamous for being the one critic at Rotten Tomatoes that everyone hates. Okay, he's known as the most contrarian reviewer at Rotten Tomatoes. He uses a 1 to 10 scale to rate movies and usually winds up rating against the grain of other reviewers on many wide-release films. So we're going to be looking at 2 of those particular reviews. Okay, incidentally, if you're wondering how contrarian this guy is, he was the only critic, I repeat, the only critic to give a negative review to Toy Story 3. Everyone else gave it positive reviews. Toy Story 3 has a 99% score on Rotten Tomatoes. The 1% is because of Armand White. Armand White is also known for being the only reviewer to give a positive review to Adam Sandler's movie Jack and Jill. However, you cannot find that review anymore because that was from Armand White's previous employer who fired him, and they purged all of his reviews. So we're going to take a look at a couple of Armand White's reviews. A couple of his evaluations that most people feel make absolutely no sense. Okay, so we're going to take a look at them, and you're going to see if you can derive any kind of sense from them. All right, so we're going to do this one at a time. So first one we're going to look at is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Okay, I did make a note here that the Rotten Tomatoes score for each of these films that he's reviewing. Okay. So, the Rotten Tomatoes score for Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is 97%. Let's take a look at what Armand Review had to say about it. Alright, so here is the review. The evaluation's title is Into the Spider-Verse's Tangled Web. Okay? Let's take a look at what Armand White has to say about it. So, the sub-lead is Marvel traps people of color and their supporters in political deceptions. The idea behind Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is to make it the most comic book of comic book movies. The directors Bob Persichetti, Peter Ramsey, and Rodney Rothman take a surfeit of animated techniques, from comic book panels to cartoons to video game graphics, and detonate them in a barrage of non-stop sensory-assaulting visual flashes accented with hip-hop music cues and self-reflexive nods to the Marvel Comics universe. The goal is to indoctrinate more viewers more deeply into the MCU commercial process. Whoever says Into the Spider-Verse is about fun doesn't understand movies or anything about how 21st century media operates, particularly the exhausting Marvel franchise. Millennials and others delude themselves by accepting market promotion as part of a larger cultural narrative. They are seduced into the Spider-Verse just like Miles Morales, voiced by Shameik Moore, the black teenager who is looking for a role model and who shares the same bitten by a radioactive spider transformational dilemma as the original Spider-Man, Peter Parker. An alternative universe version is voiced by Jake Johnson. The movie first establishes Miles' Afro-Latino ethnic family and then shows the kid's socialization as an education lottery winner in a high-achieving, multiracial public school, a fashionable Brooklyn academy with a touch of Manhattan Stuyvesant. Essentially, it's an elite induction into the fantastic world of Spidey, the legendary Marvel Comics vigilante who challenges the principles of the boy's policeman's father. Assorted superheroes brought in from the MCU teach Miles and remind us of the different types of copyrighted cartoon diversity, a comic book approach to modern political identification. Marvel and Sony gamble on Miles to meet the identity politics fashion that now dominates contemporary culture. Consider that Spider-Man's example overwhelms Miles' school assignment, Dickens' Great Expectations. But this is not just freewheeling, imaginative, and progressive capitalism as in Spielberg's Ready Player One. It's the worst social, artistic, ethnic, and political engineering. The Disney Corporation had flubbed an attempt of people of color persuasion with its first black animated heroine in the lamentable and understandably unpopular The Princess and the Frog. Marvel and Sony are cagier here, starting with the Miles Morales concept that first came about as a response to Barack Obama's presidential candidacy, a normalization that turned into an MCU idealization. The Black Lives Matter notion that kids need to see themselves represented by people who look like me rather than practice empathy or learn from vicarious experience damages self-awareness and judgment and distorts individuality. It is indoctrination through race. Miles' Boondocks hair and his black Boris Kodjoe-style father, sonorously voiced by Brian Tyree Henry, with his massive physique, jutting jaw, large lips, and tiny ears, use ethnicity as subtly manipulative traits. This catches the Obama electorate and its progeny like flies in Marvel's spider web. So many gaudy, multi-hued characters in onomatopoeia flash by on the screen during Into the Spider-Verse that a worn-out viewer might vow to never again use the political label people of color. Instead of referring to a visual artist's idiom, people of color is exposed as a synonym for minority, the term that British-Pakistani screenwriter Hanif Qureshi in his essay The Rainbow Sign decried as a common substitute for ethnic variation that actually insidiously determines someone's lack of political power. Think of people of color as a curse. Into the Spider-Verse employs people of color as just the latest digital bright shiny thing. Its stylistic potpourri copies the Teen Titan look and combines Peter Mac's psychedelia with the candied rainbow hues of Speed Racer. Sometimes the images ingeniously carry a chromatic bleed, evoking the misprint of old comic books. During climax number 97, featuring Dr. Ock's mob-like attack in Aunt May's living room, viewers are simultaneously subjected to at least 6 different styles of animation. State-of-the-art animation disguises Into the Spider-Verse's political domination as pop culture inclusion. The temerity of retelling a Spider-Man tale by pandering to the non-white demographic and those who flatter themselves for condescending to it reveals how brazen the media have become. The film's ultra-comic book effects to resemble Edgar Wright's video game Extremis and Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, but I miss the humanity of that film and will not settle for animated substitutes. Okay? By the way, in case you're wondering, here's a photo of Armand White. From what he's talking about here, you might be surprised to find out that he's African American. All right. So, once again, we're going to have you guys pause me and have at Armand White's review here. Not only do you want to look at his criteria and whether he feels that the movie met or did not meet his criteria, and it's probably clear to see that he thinks it didn't meet it. But you also want to look at what he's doing in terms of allowing some of his personal biases to get in the way of a fair review. All right. So we'll give you a pause to do this one, and then we'll take a look at the second one of his. All right, are you ready for more? All right, good. So here is the second review we're going to look at from Armand White. This one's actually a review of 2 films, okay? I could not get separate ones for each one from him. Sometimes he does two at the same time. So what you're looking at here, First, he's reviewing the film Assassin's Creed, which has a Rotten Tomatoes score of 18%. So it gives you an idea of how bad it is. And then the other one is Silence, which has a Rotten Tomatoes score of 83%. Okay? All right, so the title of this review is Crises and Faith in Filmmaking. And the sub-lead, Silly Assassin's Creed gets religion more than the ponderous and punishing Silence does. Here we go. Martin Scorsese's Silence almost offers a perfect allegory for godlessness in the age of Gawker and BuzzFeed. Set in the 17th century, the film depicts Japan's persecution of Christian missionaries and converts. It follows two young Portuguese Jesuits, Father Sebastião Rodrigues, Andrew Garfield, and Father Francisco Garupe, Adam Driver, on a search for their mentor, Father Ferreira, Liam Neeson, who is missing in Japan and rumored to have renounced his faith. The first images portray the crucifixion of several Japanese Christians at oceanside hot springs, hells. These multiple Gethsemanes seem to be surreal hallucinations revealing the cost of faith. They unmistakably evoke recent ISIS atrocities. It looks as if Scorsese is conveying a Catholic's nightmare of what can go wrong in a secular world. This opening is powerful but also disorienting. As the story moves further away from contemporary political parallels and into the esoteric history of Christians in 17th century Japan, the cool-tempered, drawn-out series of interrogations and torments is bewildering. Based on a novel by Shusaku Endo and a 1971 film by Masahiro Shinoda, Silence could easily have been titled Quest, but Scorsese's stress on the non-communication between man and God gives the title Silence a particularly disturbing meaning. The silence is symbolized in part by Father Ferreira's absence from his former students, which leads to an ironic plot twist. There's a sense of career isolation here, despite the usual hype about this film having been decades in gestation. How many passion projects can a Hollywood mogul like Scorsese claim? Silence reveals Scorsese's difficulty in maintaining faith and tradition in a world gone mad, the constant Catholic condition. Yet this personal and social dilemma gets drowned out by his ponderous religiosity and his movie brat distractions. Agony by agony, Silence imitates the classic films about religious intolerance and spiritual doubt. Father Rodrigues and Father Garupe hide in tall ferns from avenging warlords, evoking Sternberg's Anatahan. Their witnessing of enslavement recollects Mizoguchi's Sancho the Bailiff. They're surprised that the Japanese convert's devotion recalls Barzage's The Big Fisherman. Rodrigues' questioning by devious old samurai Issei Ogata is a twist on Bresson's Diary of a Country Priest. A recurring Judas figure representing abject mankind brings to mind Buñuel's Simon of the Desert. An icon of enduring faith references Bertolucci's The Last Emperor. Even Neeson's appearance unfortunately brings to mind Batman Begins. Yet none of these references ultimately increases our understanding of today's spiritual and cultural crisis. These scenes are inscrutable, as though movie buff were citing a mixed-up catechism. After the genuine internal journey of Mean Streets, which looked at Roman Catholicism among urban American hooligans, Scorsese never again showed suffering. He hid his personal dilemma behind violent macho bravado. Raging Bull's religious overtones were pretentious and irrelevant to the film's egotistical flourishes. This time, Scorsese tries an obscure religious perspective using a more composed, dignified, classical style, which makes this a religious movie without the fervor of either a penitent or a convert. There's one great shot in which Rodrigo Prieto's camera tilts up from a boat in churning seas to the sun in clouds, but even this is an image of confusion. This film about spirituality and faith suffers from the lack of both. Scorsese wallows in all manner of cruel attacks against faith, unlike Hacksaw Ridge and unlike Sancho the Bailiff. When he repeatedly subjects Father Rodrigues and the audience to the blasphemy of stepping on a Christ icon, it feels like self-flagellation, at odds with the effort to defy contemporary Hollywood nihilism. Father Rodrigues respects Japan's hidden Christians for believing the promise that their suffering would not end in nothingness but in salvation. Yet Scorsese shows the faith in words only. Instead, one landscape nearly reproduces the sinister cover of Led Zeppelin's Houses of the Holy album. Perhaps Scorsese has never heard Morrissey's I Have Forgiven Jesus. Silence takes a juvenile approach to what Ingmar Bergman already explored in his 60s Silence of God trilogy, Through a Glass Darkly, 1961, Winter Light, 1963, and The Silence, 1963. Those films, famous at one time on the long-gone art movie circuit, depicted the spiritual agony of Christians in the modern secular world. But Scorsese, belonging to the draft-dodging generation of movie brat auteurs Coppola, Spielberg, De Palma, seems to have lost touch with the cultural basis of Bergman's spiritual questioning, as well as Fellini's, Rossellini's, and the subversive Buñuel's. Just as the increasingly faithless movie brats have taken simplistic, anti-West, progressive stances on political history and gone silent on the contemporary persecution of Christians, silence shows little real interest in the ISIS and Taliban allegory it initially presents. Silence becomes a weirdly punishing chronicle of the tests that Christians endure to hold on to their faith in the face of assaults from enemies. Scorsese naively and sentimentally equates this troubling history, and its all-too-modern counterpart in the Middle East and elsewhere, with the crisis of the heart. Did anybody go to see Assassin's Creed, the perfectly disreputable antidote to silence? With less gravitas than Scorsese, director Justin Kurzel adapts the eponymous violent video game and gets right to the point of religious and moral conflict in this postmodern medieval gothic sci-fi flick about the descendant of a heretic from the Spanish Inquisition and the social scientist who experiments with eradicating mankind's violent instincts. Kurzel made the surprisingly effective Macbeth with Michael Fassbender and Marion Cotillard, and reteams them here. Fassbender is Cal Lynch, heir of the heretic Aguilar, and Cotillard is Sophia, humanitarian daughter of the fascist tycoon. Going from the 12th century to the 21st century, Kurzel does variations on themes from Macbeth, and lots of this grab-bag nonsense is as provocative as it is silly. There's the usual video game confusion about history and ethics, giving the Nietzschean quote, "Nothing is true, everything is permitted," more emphasis than any scriptural quote. But this video game nihilism also offers an Orwellian cautionary tale. A Clockwork Orange morphs into Minority Report and Ghost Rider with a constantly moving camera, cross-cut parkour fighting, furious action, and a relentless exercise in montage. The crucifixion postures and Christian allegories flying around in Assassin's Creed at least show genuine filmmaking intelligence, plus a franchise-ready, impressively physical performance by Fassbender that's almost worthy of Zack Snyder. Inept Ron Howard made it easy to hate the abuse of religious faith in the Da Vinci Code, but Kurzel shows stupid terrific skill without Scorsese's self-importance. Go ahead and put in your comments once you're done with the lecture, okay? Get some commentary in on how you feel White handled that particular review. Remember, again, that's another one that goes against the rest of the critics, okay? Is he actually trying to make a point that it's better than people think it is or worse than people think it is? Or is he just being contrarian for the sake of being contrarian? Okay? Now, that being said, that's going to do it for this week. Keep in mind, we do want to be working on the evaluation essays. Next week is going to be the revision workshop for this evaluation essay. And we will continue talking over things that you can do to improve evaluation. Okay? In the meantime, continue checking with the discussion boards, weekly discussion boards, MindTap. Get your responses and questions to the professor. We will have another Collaborate session on Thursday. And all that being said, thanks for watching. I will see you guys next time.